He held her down in that chair while his mistress hacked through her hair with kitchen scissors, mocking her swollen belly. Isabella Romano was 8 months pregnant, trapped, humiliated. They threw her into the storm like she was nothing. But when those 3 black Maybachs rolled up and her brothers stepped out, men whose names make the city tremble, the mistress's laughter died in her throat. She just made a fatal mistake. She touched a Romano. Before we show you how the woman who destroyed Isabella's dignity ended up losing everything, her freedom, her future, her life, as she knew it, hit that subscribe button. Because this story, it descends into darkness before the dawn breaks. But trust me, the revenge is the kind that makes headlines, the kind that reminds the world why you never, ever cross a Mafia family. Let's dive in. Isabella Romano Blackwood remembered the exact moment her world collapsed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. She just returned from her prenatal checkup, and Dr. Morrison had told her the baby had dropped. Labor could start any day now. She was tired, her feet were swollen, and honestly, she was just ready to meet her daughter. When she pulled into the driveway and saw Dante's Mercedes parked there, her heart did a strange flutter. He was supposed to be at his downtown office, closing that big real estate deal. Maybe he'd come home early to surprise her. Maybe he'd felt bad about how distant he'd been these past few months. The house was too quiet when she walked in. That should have been her first warning. Her suitcase sat by the front door, hastily packed with some of her clothes, just thrown inside carelessly. Isabella's heart started racing, but she told herself there had to be an explanation. Then she heard it, a woman's laughter, light and cruel, coming from upstairs, from their bedroom. She climbed those stairs slower than she ever had before. Each step felt like walking toward an execution. Her feet were so swollen they barely fit in her shoes, and she was out of breath by the time she reached the landing. The bedroom door wasn't just cracked open like someone had forgotten to close it. It was wide open, like they wanted her to see. Like this was planned. And there they were. Dante sat on their bed, fully dressed in his expensive charcoal suit, and next to him was this woman. She was beautiful. Isabella would give her that. Long auburn hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. Wearing clothes that actually fit her body instead of stretched maternity wear. The woman looked up at Isabella with eyes that held no shame, no surprise, only satisfaction. "Oh, honey, you're home," the woman said, like she lived there, like she belonged in Isabella's bedroom. "Dante and I were just discussing your situation." Isabella couldn't speak. She just stood there, one hand protectively on her belly, trying to understand what she was seeing. Dante stood up, and his face was so cold. She'd never seen him look at her like that before, like she was nothing, like she was an inconvenience he needed to handle. "Sit down, Isabella," he said. "We need to talk." She refused. She asked him who this woman was, why she was in their bedroom. That's when the woman laughed again and said the words that made Isabella's blood run cold. "Our bedroom, sweetheart. Check the calendar. I've been sleeping here for 3 months." 3 months. While Isabella was carrying his child, dealing with morning sickness and back pain and swollen ankles, he was bringing another woman into their bed. The woman pulled out her phone and started showing Isabella photos. Them in Paris at the Eiffel Tower, them in Bali on a beach at sunset, them in New York at some rooftop bar. All those business trips he told her about. She was there. She'd always been there. "He only touches you out of obligation," the woman said, looking Isabella dead in the eye. "He closes his eyes and thinks of me." Isabella tried to leave. She just wanted to get out of that room, away from their cruelty. But Dante grabbed her arm and physically forced her to sit down on the bed. His grip was tight, bruising. That's when the woman stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked into the bathroom. She came back holding kitchen scissors, the big ones, the kind you use to cut through chicken bones. Isabella's hair was long, natural, healthy. She'd been growing it for 8 years. It reached the middle of her back, thick and beautiful. It was her crown, one of the few things that still made her feel beautiful, while her body changed with pregnancy. She took care of it, spent hours conditioning it, braiding it at night. It was part of her identity. The woman, Vanessa, though Isabella didn't know her name yet, walked up behind her and ran her fingers through Isabella's hair almost tenderly. "You know what?" Vanessa said. "I hate looking at you. You look like you're not even trying anymore." Before Isabella could move, Dante's hands clamped down on her shoulders, holding her in place. She felt the first cut, heard the sickening sound of scissors slicing through her hair. She screamed. She begged him to stop. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe, and all she could think about was protecting her belly, making sure the baby was okay while this woman destroyed her piece by piece. Vanessa didn't just cut Isabella's hair, she butchered it. Uneven chunks fell everywhere, some pieces left long, while others were hacked close to the scalp. She deliberately made it look as terrible as possible, creating a nightmare of jagged edges and bald patches, and the whole time she was laughing, saying, "There, now you look how you make me feel when I see you. Now everyone will know what you really are. Pathetic." When Vanessa finally stopped, Isabella looked like someone had attacked her. Because someone had. Dante let go of her shoulders and she just sat there shaking, running her hands over what was left of her hair, feeling the uneven stumps, the exposed scalp. She felt completely stripped of her dignity, her identity, everything that made her feel like herself. But it got so much worse. Dante dragged Isabella downstairs by her arm, and that's when she realized there were people in the house. 8, maybe 10 people in her living room. His friends, some of their wives, people she'd thought cared about her. They had drinks in their hands like this was a party, like this was entertainment. And when Dante brought her down with her butchered hair and tear-stained face, they applauded. They actually clapped and laughed. One woman said, "Oh my God, what happened to your hair?" And everyone burst out laughing. Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs like a queen addressing her subjects and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the former Mrs. Dante Blackwood." Isabella tried to go back upstairs to get her things, but Vanessa blocked her path. She pointed to that one small suitcase by the door and said that was all Isabella was taking. Isabella told her she needed her mother's jewelry box from the bedroom safe. It was the only thing she had left from her mother, who died when Isabella was 15. That jewelry was everything: her grandmother's necklace, her mother's wedding ring, the pearl earrings her mother wore every Sunday. Those pieces were all Isabella had left of the woman who raised her, loved her, protected her. Dante said, "Vanessa loves vintage jewelry. She's keeping it." Isabella fell to her knees right there, 8 months pregnant, and she got down on her knees and begged. She told them her mother died in her arms, that those pieces were all she had left of her. Vanessa was already wearing the necklace, Isabella's grandmother's necklace, and she touched it and said, "Your mother had good taste. At least it looks better on me than it ever did on you." Isabella was on the floor sobbing, begging, and Dante's friends were recording everything on their phones. Nobody helped her. Nobody said this was wrong. They just watched and laughed and recorded, making sure every moment of her humiliation was captured for posterity. Dante picked Isabella up by her arms and physically carried her to the front door. He threw her suitcase out first, and it broke open on the lawn, the cheap zipper splitting, her clothes, her underwear, everything scattered across the grass for the neighbors to see. Then he pushed Isabella out. She stumbled, almost fell forward onto her belly, and caught herself on the porch railing at the last second. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, pulled a $20 bill from her designer purse, and threw it at Isabella. "For a motel," she said, "or a haircut, though honestly, I don't think anything can fix that mess." The door slammed, and Isabella was alone. It was drizzling, the kind of cold autumn rain that soaks through everything. About 20 neighbors were outside watching. Some were recording on their phones. Nobody offered to help. Nobody even asked if she was okay. Isabella tried to gather her clothes from the lawn. Stuffing them back into the broken suitcase, with shaking hands. And that's when the contractions started. Not real labor, but stress contractions that made her double over in pain, clutching her belly. She sat down on the curb because she couldn't stand anymore. She tried calling old friends, people she'd known before Dante, but every number went straight to voicemail or gave her a "this number is no longer in service" message. It took her a while to realize Dante had blocked them all from her phone months ago, quietly cutting her off from everyone who might have helped her. She'd been so isolated she hadn't even noticed. Isabella hadn't talked to her family in 3 years. 3 long years since she'd walked away from the Romano name, from the protection it offered, from the brothers who'd raised her after their mother died. Dante had convinced her they needed to build their own life, without interference, that her family's world was too dangerous, too dark. He'd made her choose between him and them, and she'd chosen him. She'd chosen love over blood, and look where it got her. She sat there in the rain for what felt like hours, shaking, her butchered hair sticking to her face, contractions coming and going. Inside the house, she could see the lights on, hear music playing, people laughing. Vanessa opened the curtain at one point and waved at her, mocking her. An elderly woman from across the street started to bring Isabella a blanket, but her husband pulled her back inside, shaking his head. Isabella thought about just lying down on that sidewalk and giving up, but then she felt her daughter move, a strong kick against her ribs. And she knew she had to try one more thing. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized when she was 10 years old, but hadn't called in 3 years. Her oldest brother, Xavier. The phone rang 4 times. She almost hung up. Then she heard his voice, deep and strong, the voice that used to read her bedtime stories and scare away her nightmares. "Who is this?" Isabella couldn't speak. She just sobbed into the phone, great heaving cries that shook her whole body. "Isabella," he said, and his voice changed completely, went soft and hard at the same time. "Baby girl, is that you?" She managed to say, "Xavier, I need help. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I stopped calling." His voice went deadly calm, the voice he used right before someone died. "Where are you right now?" Isabella gave him the address and she heard him moving, heard other voices in the background asking urgent questions. "Don't move," Xavier said. "Don't speak to anyone. We're coming." She heard him say to someone else, "Nikolai, Alessandro, get the cars. Now." Then the line went dead and Isabella was alone again. She sat on that broken suitcase for 45 minutes, the longest 45 minutes of her life. The contractions kept coming. The rain got heavier. She started to think maybe Xavier thought it was a prank call. Maybe after 3 years of silence, they didn't care anymore. Maybe she really was as alone as Dante wanted her to be. Then she heard them. 3 car engines, expensive ones, powerful. The entire street went quiet. Even the music inside the house stopped. 3 black Maybach S-Class sedans turned onto the suburban street, completely out of place in this neighborhood of modest homes and family cars. They moved together like a motorcade, like something you'd see with diplomats or heads of state. They stopped right in front of the house, blocking the driveway completely. The engines sat running for a moment, and Isabella swore she could feel the power radiating from those vehicles. Then the doors opened. Xavier stepped out of the first car, and Isabella started crying all over again, but this time with relief. He was 6'5", broad-shouldered, wearing a perfect black 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Dante's car. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw was set, and he moved with absolute authority. Everyone could tell he was someone important, someone dangerous, someone you didn't cross. Nikolai came out of the second car, 6'3" and lean, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie and a designer watch that caught what little light the overcast sky provided. He was the strategist, the lawyer, the one who never lost a case because he found every weakness and exploited it ruthlessly. And Alessandro, Isabella's baby brother, who wasn't a baby anymore, stepped out of the third car in designer casual clothes that somehow still looked more expensive than anything Dante ever wore. He was the enforcer, the one who made problems disappear. And right now, his eyes were hidden behind sunglasses, even though the sky was dark with storm clouds. The neighborhood's reaction was immediate. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is that Xavier Romano? The Xavier Romano." Another person said, "And Nikolai Romano, that's the lawyer who destroyed the Castellano family in court." Another voice, shaking with fear, "Who is that girl? Who did they hurt?" The whole street knew who these men were. The Romano brothers had become legends while Isabella was locked away from them. Xavier reached her first. He knelt down right there in the puddle, his $6,000 suit getting soaked, and he didn't care. He saw her butchered hair, her pregnant belly, her tears, her broken suitcase, and his jaw clenched so tight Isabella thought he might break his teeth. "Baby girl," he whispered, "what did they do to you?" Isabella couldn't answer. Nikolai and Alessandro formed a protective barrier around them, standing between Isabella and the watching crowd, between Isabella and the house where Dante was surely panicking. Alessandro took off his designer jacket. Isabella would find out later it cost $3,000, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Nikolai was already on his phone, his voice cold and efficient. "I need a medical team, now. Pregnant woman, 8 months. Possible distress. Yes, this address." Isabella kept saying, "I'm sorry I stopped calling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Xavier put his hand on her cheek, the way he used to when she was little and had a bad dream. "Shh," he said. "We're here now, and nobody touches our sister." Inside the house, Dante's face appeared in the window. He'd gone completely white. Isabella heard him say to someone, "That's Xavier Romano. Oh God, that's her family." Vanessa was still clueless, asking why he cared, who these men were. Then Dante said the words that made Vanessa's confidence finally crack. "She's a Romano. Her brothers own half the city. They run everything. The ports, the construction, the unions, everything. And we just, oh God, what did we do?" The doorbell rang once, long and deliberate. Nobody answered. It rang again. Then Nikolai's voice came through the door, lawyer calm, but absolutely menacing. "Open the door, Dante. We can do this easy or we can do this hard. Your choice. You have 10 seconds. When Dante still didn't answer, Alessandro kicked the door. The wood splintered and crashed open, the deadbolt tearing right through the frame. The 3 Romano brothers walked into that house like they owned it, and in a very real sense, they did. They owned everything in this city. Xavier walked in first, and every single person in that living room sat down without being told. His presence was that powerful. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just sat there, frozen, as Nikolai pulled out his phone and said, "Recording for legal purposes. Nobody leaves until we're done here. Anyone who tries will be stopped." Alessandro walked straight to Vanessa, who was still wearing Isabella's grandmother's necklace. He didn't touch her, just looked at her with these cold eyes and said, "You're wearing jewelry that doesn't belong to you." Vanessa tried to sound confident, tried to say Dante gave it to her so it was hers now. But Xavier cut her off, his voice like ice. "That belonged to our mother. She died in our sister's arms when Isabella was 15 years old. Take it off. Now." Vanessa looked at Dante for support, but Dante wouldn't even look at her anymore. He was trying to explain to Xavier that this was all a misunderstanding, that things had gotten out of hand, but nobody meant any real harm. Nikolai interrupted him. "You put hands on our pregnant sister," Nikolai said, his voice quiet and terrifying. "You held her down while this woman assaulted her. That's not a misunderstanding. That's battery. That's abuse. That's a crime." Dante tried to minimize it. "It was just hair." Xavier took one step toward him, just one step. Dante flinched and backed into the wall like a coward. "Just hair," Xavier said softly. Do I need to hold you down and see how you like it? Do I need to show you what just hair feels like? That's when Alessandro dropped the first bomb. He was on his phone, casual, like he was checking the weather. Already pulled the property records, he said, looking at Dante. This house, it's in her name, not yours. Has been since you bought it 5 years ago. Something about her credit score being better, if I remember the documents correctly. Isabella could see it on Dante's face. He'd completely forgotten that detail. Vanessa whipped around to face him, her voice rising. What? You said this was your house. You said she was living in your house. Their alliance was cracking already. Nikolai made another phone call, put it on speaker so everyone could hear. A detective's voice came through, reading out information in a bored monotone. Vanessa Catherine Stone. 3 different aliases in the system. Outstanding warrant in Florida for fraud. 2 pending cases in Texas for identity theft and insurance fraud. She'd done this before. Targeted married men. Isolated them from their families and friends. Drained their accounts. Then disappeared. She wasn't 31 like she'd claimed. She was 42. And she'd been running this con for over a decade. No, Dante said weakly. Vanessa and I are in love. This isn't... We're together. But Nikolai wasn't done. He pulled out more documents, held them up so Dante could see. You told our sister this baby might not be yours. You used that lie to justify your treatment of her. So let me show you something. He unfolded a paternity test result. You got this test done 3 weeks ago, without her knowledge or consent, which is illegal in this state, by the way. Results. 99.9% probability that you're the father. You knew this baby was yours, Dante. You knew, and you still threw her out. You still let this woman assault her. You still stole her mother's jewelry. Isabella was listening from outside, where a medical team was checking on her and the baby, and she felt sick. He'd tested their daughter without telling her. He'd known the truth and thrown them both out anyway. But Alessandro wasn't done. He told Nikolai to show the final document, and Nikolai's face was grim as he unfolded it. A life insurance policy. $2 million on Isabella Romano Blackwood's life. Beneficiary, Dante Blackwood. Date the policy was taken out, 6 months ago, when Isabella was 3 months pregnant, right after Dante met Vanessa. Xavier's voice went quiet, which was more terrifying than if he'd yelled. You were going to kill her, weren't you? Make it look like pregnancy complications. Women die in childbirth all the time. Nobody would have questioned it. Dante fell apart. He started crying, saying he would never, that they'd gotten it all wrong. But then he said, Vanessa said we just needed the insurance in case. And he stopped himself, but it was too late. He'd admitted it. Vanessa had been planning to kill Isabella after the baby was born. Dante would get the insurance money. Vanessa would get Dante and access to the Romano family through the baby, and they'd disappear with $2 million and Isabella's daughter. Isabella watched through the window as Xavier's fist clenched, watched Nikolai grab his arm and say quietly, Not worth it, brother. He's not worth spending the rest of your life in prison. Xavier said to Dante, his voice barely above a whisper, You have no idea how close you are to not walking out of this room. If my brother wasn't holding my arm right now, you'd already be dead. The police arrived, officers who clearly knew exactly who the Romano brothers were and treated them with careful respect. Vanessa was arrested on her outstanding warrants, screaming and blaming Dante, saying he'd planned everything, that he was the one who wanted the insurance money. He targeted her because she's rich, Vanessa shrieked as they put her in handcuffs. He knew who she was. This was all his idea. She was throwing him under the bus completely, their so-called love evaporating the moment real consequences appeared. The police told Dante he wasn't under arrest yet, but he shouldn't leave town. Nikolai served him with an immediate restraining order. Dante couldn't enter his own house, or rather, Isabella's house. He couldn't contact Isabella. He had to leave with only the clothes he was wearing. Xavier leaned in close to Dante and said, You're lucky we're doing this legally, for now. But the Romano brothers weren't done, not even close. Over the next 72 hours, they systematically destroyed everything Dante had. Xavier called the landlord of Dante's real estate office, a building Xavier actually owned through one of his many shell companies. Lease terminated immediately, effective that day. Nikolai froze all the joint accounts and filed for emergency divorce, citing abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Alessandro leaked the story to social media, and those videos the neighbors took went viral. Within hours, #JusticeForIsabella was trending nationwide. Dante's business partners dropped him immediately, not wanting to be associated with a man who'd abused his pregnant wife. Xavier bought out Dante's personal loans from the bank, $180,000 in debt, and called them all due immediately. By the end of 2 days, Dante's car was repossessed, his credit cards were declined everywhere, and his phone was shut off because he couldn't pay the bill. A week later, Dante showed up at Nikolai's downtown office to sign the settlement papers. He was thin, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd been living in. He'd been sleeping in his car until they repossessed it, then in homeless shelters. Nikolai put the papers in front of him without a word. Sign everything over. Full custody to Isabella, child support of $5,000 monthly, damages of $1 million for emotional distress, and theft of family heirlooms. Or face charges for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Your choice. Dante signed everything with shaking hands. When he finished, he asked, his voice barely audible, "Can I see her? Can I apologize?" Xavier had been sitting quietly in the corner the entire time. Now he finally spoke. "You'll never breathe the same air as my sister again. If you come within 500 feet of her or her daughter, I'll know. And what happens next won't be legal, and nobody will ever find your body. Do you understand me?" Dante left that office a broken man, and he had nothing left. Nothing at all. 3 months later, Isabella sat in her home, the same house, but completely redecorated with all traces of Dante removed. The nursery was painted sage green and filled with everything her daughter could ever need. Isabella's hair had grown back into this beautiful short style that she actually loved more than her long hair. It was easier to manage, made her look strong, and every time she looked in the mirror, she saw a survivor, not a victim. And her baby girl was here, healthy, perfect, loved beyond measure. Isabella named her Sophia Marie Romano, taking back the family name for both of them. Her brothers visited every single day. They took turns holding Sophia, being gentle uncles in a way that made Isabella cry happy tears. These men who commanded fear and respect across the entire city turned to absolute mush around their niece. Xavier brought groceries every week, always including Isabella's favorite foods. Nikolai brought legal documents showing everything was finalized: the divorce, the custody agreement, the restraining order, all of it. And Alessandro had set up an online boutique business for Isabella, helping her design jewelry inspired by her mother's stolen pieces. It was actually doing really well. She had independence, income, and purpose. People asked Isabella if she regretted calling her brothers that night. She looked at baby Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms and knew the answer. If she hadn't called, her daughter might have been born on that sidewalk. Or worse, Dante and Vanessa's plan might have worked, and neither of them would be here now. Isabella had been isolated for so long that she'd forgotten she had people who loved her unconditionally. Xavier told her they'd never stopped looking for her during those 3 years. They'd searched, they'd worried, they'd waited for her to reach out. They respected her choice to live her own life. But they never stopped being ready to help her. Isabella had thought they'd be angry that she'd married someone they didn't know, someone who wasn't good enough for a Romano. But Nikolai explained it best. "We were hurt, not angry. You're our sister. That never changes. Nothing you could do would ever change that." Dante was working a warehouse job now, earning minimum wage and living in a studio apartment in a building the Romano family happened to own. He paid his child support on time every single month, too afraid of Xavier to miss a payment. He'd never met his daughter. The restraining order was permanent, His former friends wouldn't talk to him. He was a social pariah who'd lost everything. Vanessa was serving 8 years in a Florida state prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. They'd used Isabella's case to reopen cases in Texas, and Vanessa would be transferred there after serving her Florida sentence. She was looking at 15 years minimum, probably more. Other victims had come forward after Isabella's story went viral, women who'd also been targeted by Vanessa's schemes. She destroyed the wrong woman, and now she'd pay for all of it. Last week, they'd had a family dinner. All 3 brothers, their partners, Isabella, and baby Sophia. There was laughter, love, protection, belonging. Everything Isabella thought she'd lost forever. She looked around that table and realized something important. She'd lost herself trying to be someone's wife. She'd let Dante convince her that she had to choose between him and her family. She'd let him cut her off from everyone who truly loved her. But her brothers had never forgotten who she was, even when she'd forgotten herself. Isabella held Sophia close and whispered to her daughter, "You'll always know where you come from. You'll always know your family. I'll make sure of that." Xavier's hand settled on Isabella's shoulder, warm and protective. Nikolai smiled at her from across the table. Alessandro made silly faces at Sophia, making the baby giggle. This was home. This was family. This was everything. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe, because we share real stories like this every single week. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever felt isolated by someone you loved? What would you have done if you were Isabella? Remember this: no relationship is worth losing your family over. No partner who truly loves you will ever cut you off from the people who knew you first. Never let anyone make you forget who you are, where you come from, or what you're worth. See you in the next story.